Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. I remember reading a Wired article a long while ago where it talked about this study that showed that readers tend to prefer stories that had been spoiled for them over unspoiled ones, which has stuck with me ever since, to the point where I alluded to it in my The Promised Neverland plot twist video without really interrogating what I was saying. I also recently watched another plot twist video by the channel Now You See It where that study is mentioned, which got me thinking about spoilers more generally again. So let's be clear about a few general points regarding spoiler etiquette before we jump into it. I've always been of the opinion that when talking about stories, spoilers should be kept within the conversation's scope, aka no random allusions to spoilers, so that people can choose whether to be spoiled or not. Of course, within reason. If you don't know what Rosebud is or the iconic reveal in The Empire Strikes Back, I'm not going to feel for you. I also think that spoilers are not the intention of a creator. There are plenty of ways to spoil outcomes within the context of a story, flash forwards being a key example and Grave of the Fireflies being one of said examples. And so external spoilers are subverting that intention. We could talk till the cows come home about whether authorial intent matters or not in regard to the way we should consume narrative. I'm not making a value judgment here. I'm just acknowledging that that's part of the nature of spoilers discussion. So if you want to comment about a story that wasn't included in the opening text, please follow Comment Spoiler Etiquette, an example of which can be found in the pinned comment and also in the description. So with all of that said, the purpose of this video is to explore 3 stories that I had vastly different spoiler experiences with to make the case that spoilers may increase enjoyment because of how it encourages the frame by which you watch the show, but perhaps at the expense of your emotional investment. Gakkou Gurashi I watched for the first time a few months back, and the show's key hallmark comes from the plot twist at the end of the first episode. What seems like another standard slice of life anime based around a club in a high school, the School Living Club in this case as opposed to the Classics Club or Game Creation Club Provisional, solely introduces us to its primary cast of 4, before pulling back the curtain and revealing that the show is set in a zombie apocalypse. And that's what I knew it from before I even started watching it. Hell, it's what put it on my radar even if I didn't get to it for another 4 years after it first aired. So I went in spoiled to the first episode, which I think made me enjoy it more because I was effectively re-watching the episode. Because I already knew what was going to happen as far as the plot went, I wasn't using my mental energy to make predictions, and instead was looking at the construction of the show to see how it built into the inevitable plot twist. That allowed me to notice stuff like Miki not noticing the class settings until Yuki brought it up, wind blowing even when the windows appeared closed, the same glass shattered, the people walking below weirdly, the cross on the roof, and the small double entendres in language choice. I'm a pretty observant watcher, and as the name of the channel implies, I do rewatch almost everything to figure out what makes it tick. And so in this case, being spoiled allowed me to do what I normally do on rewatch on the initial viewing of the episode. And that comes with the benefit of still feeling like everything is new, because rewatching for structure and thematic development inherently isn't a novel experience, it's just a more mechanical one. So getting to meet new characters and seeing their relationship develop was just like any other new show experience. In addition to all the other story elements like dialogue, pacing, cinematography, and score. After that first episode though, I was as much in the dark about what was coming as anyone else who wasn't spoiled. Though I think that initial knowledge made my story predictions stronger because I had taken the first episode in through more of an analytical lens. So in that regard, I'm convinced that spoilers give the initial experience of consuming a story a replay element, as though they allow the audience to better understand the story's construction because we're not busy using mental energy on making predictions about the plot or the characters even while everything is still new. It's a cool mix of initial and rewatch that gives the audience a base for tying in material to a conclusion they already know, but that they're experiencing for the first time. And with that in mind, I can totally understand why spoilers can make for a better viewing experience, and in fact get people to consume stories they otherwise wouldn't. Would Gakkou Gurashi even have the mild name recognition without that first episode plot twist? Would anyone still be quoting the plot twist in The Sixth Sense if it hadn't been spoiled for people who had never seen it? Probably not, and so it's hard to conclude that spoilers are just a blanket bad thing. Especially for people who don't really interrogate or ruminate on their consumption, since it's a rare chance to see how stories are built. So now we arrive at the inverse case, but it's a bit harder than simply saying that I was spoiled as to a story and then I didn't like it. Because who can say whether I would have enjoyed it even if I hadn't been spoiled to it? I dropped Angel Beats after one episode because the ending was in the back of my mind at the time, but was that the only reason, or was it because it just wasn't a show I would have enjoyed, period? And how could I say that not being spoiled is what made Hyoka so special to me? I will say that being spoiled to an ending makes one less likely to experience the story more generally, especially if it's just a mediocre experience and not a masterpiece of its medium. I'm unconvinced that not knowing the plot of Solo would have made me enjoy that film more. But even if you walk into the theater and you know that everyone survived the Apollo 13 mission, that doesn't make the movie any less fantastic, and neither would knowing how 1917 ends prevent you from being stunned by an achievement in cinema. Please go see it when it comes out. So in lieu of developing amnesia and being able to experience Wolf Children again, all I can really do is speculate that because I knew the ending of the film, I was robbed of some of my emotional connection to the story and the characters. To be clear, I still loved the film, but I can't help but feel like I was more detached than usual while watching it because I knew what the plot points were. I wasn't discovering the world and the characters alongside the runtime, I was robotically noting how the children's attitudes were the reverse of how they'd end up, and my breath didn't catch when Hana was in danger during the rainstorm. I was still blown away by the wintertime run and a lot of the beautiful direction in the film, but character actions were more like a checklist than a big developmental moment, and I think the place where that hurt the most was when Hana's husband died. To be clear, I still felt the emotional aspect tell me that knowing the opening of Up suddenly makes it just not hit. These sequences are so effective at forcing you to empathize, but knowing it was going to happen maybe made me subconsciously pull back and not get as emotionally invested. It wasn't a what's going to happen now narrative question because I was assured in the knowledge of what was going to happen. It was a more comfortable viewing experience in the same way that knowing when the jump scares happen in a horror film would take away the edge, but that seems, well, like a missed opportunity. I could always have re-watched the film and had the process of noting the construction and the development of themes and characters. But I never had that initial wonder about where the story could go or what would happen to the characters. I like the emotional impact that stories can have on me, and I can't help but wonder if Kamina's death had been spoiled for me in Gurren, would that have been such an emotionally powerful moment? From the very beginning of the show, Kamina was this larger-than-life character who inspired our main character Simone and by extension, the audience. His quotes, his mannerisms, his emotional complexity hidden behind his absurd sunglasses. These were all things I instantly fell in love with, and most of all was the narrative force he was in the story. He was the agent on whom so much of the change and development in the narrative was pinned on from a structural level. Critical to the little ragtag group of freedom fighters that was forming as the linchpin, holding everyone together with his leadership and charisma. To say that Kamina is the most important character in Gurren is maybe an understatement, and that's triply so because of his death. The gaping hole in my heart unified me with Simone, Yoko, and the rest of Team Tai Gurren. It served as an emotional through line for understanding the characters, and to relate to them and resonate with them. Without Kamina, there was no core driver to the story, and that lack of a structural piece was matched by the dysfunction in the group inside the show. Watching Simone step up in the vacuum created a narrative resolution to this issue, even as the happily ever after scene also affirmed this character development moment. One that closes the cycles of grief both for Simone and the audience as we move forward with new purpose. I think part of my affinity for Gurren is how it was able to make me undergo this emotional journey that I not only shared with the characters on screen, but also in the function of the narrative itself. If I knew that Kamina was going to die before I started Gurren, would I have been so invested in the Simone-Kamina relationship? Which you need to be given how much weight it has long after he's passed. Would I have really been able to empathize and understand what Simone was going through on an implicit level instead of a conceptual one? Would I have appreciated that unification of the lack of an emotional center in the internal story world and the external narrative construction? Would I consider the happily ever after scene to be one of the greatest scenes in anime that I've ever watched? I have to say no. I cannot imagine myself enjoying the show to the degree I had because my emotional investment inherently would not have been the same. And so even though I loved Wolf Children and still think of it as an amazing film, I can't help but wonder if I would have loved it even more if I had just gone on the proper emotional journey. Spoilers enable an audience to process information and make connections to an event or ending that they already know, foregoing predictions in favor of more of a structural look. but maybe at the cost of their emotional engagement with the storyline and the characters as they have gained information outside the confines of the story. This is, of course, just a theory based on some personal anecdotes, but they are certainly reflective of my experience. Let me know if you've had any similar experiences regarding spoilers, and especially if the inverse is true, where spoilers actually increased your emotional engagement. Just be sure to follow spoiler etiquette if you're going to get into detail, because, spoiler alert, if you don't, I'm going to delete the comment. Maybe spoilers are just a reminder that one's initial impression of a story is still so important to making an emotional judgment, and that rewatches are where the analytical, structural side is supposed to take over. But since you can never get that initial impression back, maybe that makes it all the more sacred.